All right, everybody. Welcome to episode 4 of the Unfiltered Truth. I'm your host, Eric Smith, here with my co-host, partner in crime, James Shook. Thank you, everybody, for joining in. I appreciate everybody tuning in last week. We've, I think, eclipsed the 16,000 view mark on our podcast from last week. Can't thank everybody enough for the support, all the feedback, all the live comments, and everything else we got. So what you got going on, James?
Unbelievable response we got last week. I think part of it had to do with just the topic itself. It's pretty popular topic, we'll say nowadays, would be that preparedness and potential unrest and situations like that. But no, amazing response we got. I was blown away. We had good feedback from, even during the live broadcast. We had good feedback from the viewers. So hopefully we can get some more of that going today. We can get the comments section rolling, and you guys feel free to chime in. If there's a topic we're covering, you got some specific questions or whatnot, feel free to throw them out there. We'll address them if we can.
Awesome. Yeah, and kind of give everybody a recap of last week. We went over preparedness and disaster situations, civil unrest, the whole bug in, bug out thing, and what kind of food to have and things like that. I did want to address one comment that somebody said that we didn't get to last week on that, and then we'll hop right into this week. Was somebody was asking why everybody talks about staying at home and why are you not out fighting? Well, my response to that would be, who's your enemy? What exactly are you fighting, and what's your purpose of being out? If you don't really have a mission or a point to being out and you're just kind of arbitrarily looking around for enemies, that's kind of why I would say most people shelter in place, because it's your homestead, it's where you're safest and where you have the most items.
Yeah, I also think the more reasonable people are they're going to wait till there's a clear threat that's identified or a clear purpose that they need to address, and then kind of move forward from there. It's the more you dilute something by making everything a cause for action, the less the actual action has validity, we'll say.
Yep. Well, that kind of recaps last week. We want to talk about classes we've got coming up at Zenith Jiu-Jitsu. We're kind of in the works, kind of based off the feedback we had from that from that podcast. People were wanting to learn more about guns, learn more about preparing, learning more about self-defense, and we do have some classes in the works. Hopefully, we're going to get a couple, 3 or 4 of them scheduled here soon. We'll post it on our website, on your website, obviously, and kind of keep everybody updated. Our goal for those classes is to go over basic firearms instruction with people, basic self-defense, the laws, and those kind of things, which we're going to do a little bit of today, so you get it for free. And that's kind of our topic for this week, is just everything Second Amendment.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one thing that I do want to point out about the programs that we're talking about in the early stages, we will not be shooting live at the range.
No.
For those programs, so just so that everyone's clear when they come in for these initial classes, there'll be firearms manipulation as far as how to handle the weapon, firearm safety basics, things like that, as well as some self-defense hand-to-hand type basics.
Awesome. So let's go. I guess we'll just jump into the first part of the topic this week. One big thing that got brought up last week, a couple of questions offline I got, were the benefits of concealed carry versus open carry, and kind of touched on the pros and cons of both. For those that don't know, obviously open carry is where you see people at the supermarket with a pistol on their side or a rifle, whatever it is they're carrying that day. Concealed carry is carrying in a holster, inside your waistband, inside your pocket, depending on how you carry your gun. And I'll go give you my pros of concealed carry and the pros of open carry, and I'm kind of hop into that. Obviously, the pros for open carry to me is you have open access to your firearm. You don't have to move any clothing or anything out of the way. You probably have a little bit quicker reaction time. Carrying in the open, concealed carry, a huge pro to me is nobody knows you have a weapon, because if somebody sees you have a weapon on you and they're there to do harm, if I'm the bad guy, you're the first person I'm taking out because I see the gun on your side. So it also kind of draws unnecessary attention to you in public. In my personal opinion, again, I'm all about carrying a weapon, being safe, but not a big fan of open carry for that reason. Con of concealed carry, like we already said, you have a little bit lack of reaction time. It's harder to get to if you haven't trained to take your gun out of the holster from your clothing and shoot. It can be very cumbersome at times.
Yeah, and we can address open carry first, I think.
Sure.
It'll probably be the shorter of the two topics that we'll be discussing here. As far as open carry goes, I think I've open carried one time before.
Yeah.
And I believe it was just because I was already I want to say that I had my holster already strapped into the belt and whatnot on an open carry holster because we were at the range. We were actually at a private property doing some shooting. And I think when we went to lunch or something like that, I wanted to carry my weapon, but I didn't want to take everything off. So I just holstered the gun on the side. We went to lunch. We were in an area, I think, where people are a little more used to that, a little bit further into the mountains. So, I didn't have any issues with it. I do think that open carry does draw a lot of attention. And it's unnecessary attention. As you pointed out before, you don't want to make yourself a target unnecessarily.
Yep, yeah, 100%. That's kind of one of the things, when I was a police officer, it was always those things where even when you were doing something as simple as sitting down and eating, lunch with your coworkers, eating lunch even with my family, we've been out before. I always had a target, partially because obviously I have the badge on, but the bigger target, I personally feel is if a bad guy comes in there, I'm the only person capable of ending the threat, and they know that because they see the gun on my side, they see the badge, and that's why I would be the first person they took out. In my undercover days, going out to eat when I carried concealed, I felt super safe. Didn't feel like I was an absolute target, A, because I didn't have the uniform on, and B, because I didn't have a gun sitting out for everybody to see. And it's just one of those things where people not knowing that you're a threat to them is actually a benefit to us. And I think it absolutely mitigates the lack of reaction time you may have for carrying concealed instead of carrying open, because you're going to get the drop on them most times because they're not going to be looking for you.
Yeah, and that goes back to something we've pointed out before. I think you actually used this phrase a week or so ago, was action is faster than reaction. Yep. So, that's always going to be the case. Of course, there's the argument to be made, as you stated earlier, if the weapon is in an open carry situation, you can maybe access it a little bit faster, but your reaction time is going to be, I think, still reduced because of the potential suspect or whoever's, looking to do harm has identified that you have that weapon. And so therefore they probably have the jump on you already. So it's, if nothing else, being concealed. Of course it takes, a second longer to draw in some situations, but I guess you could argue back and forth about what that 2 or 3 seconds leading up to it's like if you have the weapon open versus having it concealed, and how the potential threat identifies you as a threat to himself.
Correct. And that's why, going back to what we talked about a little bit again last week, was training. If you're training the way you're carrying and you're actually shooting from those positions where you're carrying it concealed, you can absolutely minimize the reaction differences and probably make it very negligible. When I was undercover, that's one of those things we constantly practiced was drawing from concealed positions, drawing from seated positions and things like that. When I initially started doing it, it was very cumbersome and very awkward because I was so used to 95% of the time I was on duty when I had a firearm. I was so used to open carry and have it right in a certain place on my hip. I had to train myself out of it. But once you do that, it's really not that hard. And with a few weeks, few months of good training, you can minimize those reaction gaps.
Yeah, absolutely. And with anything else that we've talked about over the last several weeks, training is going to be one of the most important aspects of it.
Yeah, 100%. And to go over, first off, the laws in Georgia, a lot of people, and even me up till recently, were under the impression that it did used to be this way to carry concealed in Georgia. And again, most states that are reciprocal with us, which we went over last week, have the same type of laws. If you're carrying a gun concealed or open in Georgia, you have to have a weapons permit unless you're a certified law enforcement officer. You have to have one of those. If you're carrying a pistol, if you have a long gun or a rifle, you do not have to have a carry permit. A lot of the reason why that is if you're hunting, that's the whole reason you don't have to have a carry permit to carry your 338 Lapua out in the woods to go hunting with.
Yeah. And, I know we lightly touched on it last time. One of the, major differences there is Georgia, as you stated, is a state where we have a carry permit, not necessarily what most people refer to as a concealed carry weapons permit or a CCW, something like that. Correct. So just to carry at all. Now, I do know that there are some states where open carry is like full-time, even with a handgun, and then they have to have a specific concealed carry permit to carry it concealed out in public on their persons. However, just, again, to be clear for everyone that's in the state of Georgia, you have to have a carry permit to carry a handgun in any fashion on your persons outside of your car, your home, and your business.
That's correct. So in Georgia, if you're wanting to carry in all those places outside of what we talked about just now, be sure you go to your probate court in your local jurisdiction, go get your permit. It's really not that hard. It's a little more difficult now than it used to be because the whole COVID thing. You have to usually set an appointment to go in there, and I think most counties are at least issuing them now, new permits again. So
yeah, from what I hear, what I understand from a few close friends that's recently got their permit, they are doing it on appointment, but they're definitely issuing permits again. I know for a little while it was shut down, and they had a temporary pause on it, but I believe everything's back up and running as far as if you want to attain a new permit or renew a permit.
Correct. Correct. So let's go over a little bit of the gear selection when you are carrying concealed versus open carry, and of the differences in holsters and retentions and things that you can have. One of my favorite personal open carry holsters, if I'm carrying, at work, or if it's one of those things where I'm in my vehicle and I happen to have it on my hip leaving from work and I'm not carrying concealed. I like any kind of a Serpa style holster that has a little bit of retention on it, because if somebody does, for whatever reason, try to get their hands on my firearm, they at least used to have to work for it a little bit. Not a real big fan of carrying holsters with zero retention. Maybe it's the police officer in me. Yeah. So I think those, any kind of inside the waistband holster for carrying concealed is good. There's really, in my opinion, not a necessity to have retention if you're carrying it in your waistband or concealed, because nobody knows it's there in the first place.
Yeah. The one thing that I will say, I've seen this recently, and you can, throw in, your beliefs on it as well, or however you feel about it, but the leather inside the waistband holsters.
Yep.
I saw a unique video not too long ago where it was actually able to catch the trigger, and it was able to release, just because I think it was worn and folded in that spot where right around where the trigger guard would go into the holster itself.
Yep.
And I want to say that it actually discharged the gun when they put it in, and it was actually capable of, or was able to get the trigger safety released, as well as pull the hammer back, or to pull the trigger to fire the firearm. So in those situations, you probably want to be a little careful. I know they do make some really good leather holsters that are, that have, that are pretty solid. They're not a very flimsy material.
Yep.
And I would say if you're going to look for any kind of leather, especially inside the waistband, because of you're going to have a lot of pressure usually on it. So depending on what size you are, how tight you wear your clothing or your pants, mainly your belt, whatnot, you're going to get a lot of compression on something that is leather or something that's more pliable than, let's say, a Kydex holster like you just posted.
Yep.
And I'm just a big fan of the Kydex holsters in those varying materials.
Yep, absolutely. The Kydex holsters are super nice. You can pretty much anywhere locally, you can get somebody that makes them for inside the waistband. They're great because we do have, even though there's technically no retention because there's not a button or something you have to manipulate, like you said, there's good pressure on it. It does hold it inside the holster very well.
Yeah.
And it's not just going to arbitrarily fall out if, you sit down or something like that, which having an inside the waistband like cloth holster, which is one of the things I used to carry when I was undercover, that kind of thing can happen where if you lean or shift too much, the gun can kind of come out of it. So having the side pressure, it's something very good you hit on your gun to retain it in your waist is a very good thing. Something a lot of people don't think about when they're carrying, in my opinion, is the type of clothing they're wearing. You kind of hit on it. Walking around and carrying a gun, in basketball shorts or warm-up pants can be a little difficult sometimes.
Yeah.
A couple different reasons. One, your pants will fall down. Two, it makes it incredibly hard to get the gun out of the holster sometimes, because when you're trying to get the gun out, you're pulling your pants up instead of pulling the gun out of the holster because there's no pressure on the gun against your hip to allow you to manipulate the gun to get it out. So think about your clothing. If you're going to carry, for sure, wear something with a sturdy waistband, in my opinion. It's just safer for you that way.
Yeah, and I think the folks that do carry a Kydex holster inside the waistband, just be aware that the bottom set screw, the retention screw on that holster, on most holsters, we'll say, almost every, whether it's inside the waistband or outside the waistband, Kydex holster does have a retention setting screw on it, so that it'll grab the firearm a little tighter on the side so that it can capture it somewhat. Just be completely aware if you are using a Kydex, especially inside the waistband. Just adjust your retention so that you're not pulling your pants up, or it's not, disturbing your waistline as you remove the gun. I think they probably come set at different retention levels, so you definitely want to make adjustments to that. And then to take that a step further, if you do have a Kydex, especially inside the waistband holster, make sure that you go back and take that retention screw out and maybe put a little bit of blue Loctite on it and then reinstall it.
And one of the pros that I really do like about the Kydex style holsters, and I think you can see my mouse on the screen, you should be able to now, is right here, especially on like the models like Glocks and things like that that don't have a separate safety outside the trigger. It does actually cover up the trigger to your firearm, which is very good. That way you don't risk, accidentally discharging your firearm or anything like that when you've got it inside your waistband. So that's a huge plus to a Kydex style holster.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm going to share that. And then obviously you've got the standard cloth holsters and things like those. Like I said, they're inexpensive, but you kind of get what you pay for with gear, in my opinion. Don't always go to the cheapest option because a lot of times I'm a true believer in the firearms industry. You buy once, you cry once. You usually get what you pay for, good craftsmanship and things like that.
Yeah, and there's plenty of companies that they're kind of a build to suit.
Yep.
For your holsters. I know G-Code's one of those, and we're not affiliated or associated with those guys in any way. So just happened to throw that out there because it's one on the top of my head. If you order a particular holster from them, whether it's outside or inside the waistband, it's likely a lot of times it's made once you order it, and they'll make it to exactly where you want to carry it. And a lot of times they have varying options, we'll say, on how you can have that holster made or for which purpose that you're going to use it for. So definitely look into that because they are customizable and they take a little longer to get. They usually take you 4 to 6 weeks to get it, but sometimes that would definitely be worth the wait and definitely worth the extra expense.
Yep. All right. Now let's talk about a couple different kinds of firearms, I guess, that you can carry on your person. We don't have to go into brands necessarily, but the different types. You've obviously got your revolvers versus your semi-automatics. One of the big pluses with a revolver versus a semi-automatic is they are a lot less likely to malfunction.
Yeah, however, less moving parts.
Correct, less moving parts. However, with today's firearms and today's semi-automatic firearms, especially if you buy one of the more well-known brands, you can absolutely not have to really worry about any kind of malfunctions or anything like that. So there's something to think about. Usually with semi-automatic firearms, you're going to have a higher capacity for bullets and things like that. And they are super light these days and, again, have a minimal chance to malfunction. So it's just kind of what your personal preference is. I'm a semi-automatic guy, always have been. My personal weapon of choice when I'm, carrying inside my waistband is a Glock 43. The 43Xs are fantastic as well. So it's just kind of personal preference of what you want to do and any input you have. You give me half.
Yeah, as far as I have very little experience with revolvers, and it's more just for personal reasons. I think that the lack of capacity in the magazine is going to be one of the factors that kind of keeps me away from the revolver. And I think if less experienced gun users are relying on a revolver, they do have to expect there's going to be a certain increase in recoil.
Yes.
And then there'll also be in some cases there's going to be because the gun is so small usually. You're going to have a reduction in your target acquisition distance. Or where maybe you feel safe shooting it at. And so I've just kind of always viewed, and people can kill me in the comments if they want to. I know there's a lot of big time revolver guys out there, so I'm sure I'll hear about it. But I've never been one for revolvers again because of the lack of capacity.
Yep.
And more than anything, the recoil for inexperienced shooters. And then the idea that it's an extra close range weapon to me, and that's just my personal view on it. If I have a Glock 17 or something like that, I'm going to rely on that and feel more secure at a greater distance than I would, pulling a snub nose 38 revolver or something like that.
Correct. And one of the biggest things that you need to really think about when you're carrying a firearm is understanding that you're there to protect yourself and you're there to kind of protect the people around you. And one of the most common events that we see, becoming more and more common these days for whatever reason are active shooter events. And understand that by you choosing to carry a firearm, you could be making the choice to save somebody's life outside of yourself. Kind of want to touch on a couple things as far as an active shooter event goes, kind of dispel a few myths. For those that don't know, I was trained by the FBI HRT team, former members of them. That's where I received my certification down in Perry, Georgia. I went through a long 1 week class. It was super intensive, crazy good class, learned a lot of things. most people seem to think that the only time they're going to run across active shooter events in a school, because that's all we really hear about on the news. Because tragically, if somebody kills our children, that's what's going to make the news, not just an active shooter event in a mall. You may see it in a snippet for a minute, but after that, it's kind of going. But when something happens at a school, you hear about it constantly. Obviously, Las Vegas was kind of an exception because of how many deaths they had there. But just so most people know, 42% of all active shooter events take place at commercial locations, places of business, stores, malls. That includes sporting events, concerts, things like that. Only 21% of active shooter events, thankfully, take place at schools, and that's from a study that the FBI put out from 2000 to 2017. I don't think that they've updated anything since then. And kind of something to think about in an active shooter situation is you're going to have three choices. It's what they teach now. Most everybody's heard it by now: run, hide, or fight. Are you going to make the choice to run out of the business? Or are we going to make a choice to hide? Or are we going to actually try to fight the shooter? I'll interject this real quick, don't let you respond. My personal opinion and my personal training shows that fighting is the way to go in an active shooter to save lives, because according to the training that I had, there's one death. It was, I think, about every 7 seconds in an active shooter event. And that was one thing they told us as police officers: if you're going to respond to somewhere and sit outside of school, which we've seen this happen recently, and just listen to gunfire, every second that you're waiting, you're potentially, allowing somebody else to die. So it's just the decision as not only as a police officer, but as a human. If you're in one of those situations and you have a gun, you're going to have to make the decision to engage that person or not.
Yeah, well, I know there's some studies, and I don't have an exact study to cite right now. I can look it up, and we can post it in the comments later. But there has definitely been some research done on what happens in active shooter situations when they go into a situation where the general public is dormant as far as being able to return any kind of fire or any kind of resistance.
Yep.
Versus once the active shooter is engaged. Typically, I'm going to just break it down in plain English here. Once there's bullets flying back the other direction, I know they've done some studies on the percentage was really high in those numbers as far as, did the shooter retreat? Did the shooter, tend to lose focus on whoever he had initially went to attack? And so, like I said, we can find the specifics of those studies. I'm just kind of going back off the top of my head from things that I've read over the years. But yeah, definitely when bullets are flying back the other direction, you have a greater likelihood of retreat, or you have a greater likelihood of at least drawing a distraction from maybe what their intent was at that moment, and drawing it towards someone that can actually at least attempt to defend themselves and defend the others around them.
Correct. In most studies are anywhere between 92 and 97%, where when an active shooter meets resistance the first time, that they're either going to either drop their gun or commit suicide. Typically, the higher of it is they'll go find somewhere, lay down and commit suicide and kill themselves.
Yeah.
And that is with both police and civilian responses. The first time they meet any kind of resistance, they typically give up, whether by, like I say, actually laying down their gun and laying down and saying, I'm done. The more likely scenario is that they're going to kill themselves. And that's very, very important to think that if you have a gun and you're out in public and you have the opportunity to save somebody's life, should you? It's a personal choice to make. I'm not telling you what choice to make. I know what choice I would make. But you have to come up with a choice in your head, because I want people that are listening to think about this. If it was your family and James or I's there, and we have the choice to run, hide, or fight, and we choose to run our own skin, but then your son, your daughter, your mother, your father dies because we haven't made the choice to risk our lives for our fellow man, that understand that that's a thing. So if you're going to carry a gun in public, that's a decision you need to train in your head that you're going to be willing to make or not to make.
Yeah, and we're going to eventually get into, I think, listing some types or maybe some specific brands of firearms that are commonly carried and whatnot. Give the viewers maybe someone that's inexperienced or maybe that doesn't carry at all now and is looking to carry in the future. We'll give them some examples as well. I think one of the things that's very important to point out, and we point this out, I know I pointed out in my self-defense courses, especially the ones that I teach for women only. In those self-defense courses, we try to lay out the different scenarios. Once we get to the topic of carrying weapons, I try to always lay out the scenarios where you would more likely fight or pull your gun and start to fight back, versus scenarios where you wouldn't, even if even if the people that are there to do harm are exposing firearms and maybe they're yelling commands at people and whatnot. And I'll give you an example of that. One of the things that I've always taught was, and this is from researching a lot as well, is that if we're in situations are very different often when you have an active shooter, or let's say we're going to back up and say that the shooter's not active. They're wielding firearms and they're coming in to commit a felony of some sort, whether that be robbery or whatnot.
Yep.
And I want to make this one really clear for the viewers. In a bank hostage situation, say a couple of guys bust in the bank, they're looking to rob the bank. They tell everyone to get down on the ground, and they're trying to get the money, and they're just walking around keeping everybody down so that they can get the money and they can get out of there. I do not believe those are situations where you need to stand up and try to take them on in a gunfight.
No, 100%.
And those are usually mass public situations where the intent is not so obvious that they're looking to harm or kill people.
Correct.
And then you have situations where, a gunman opens up fire in a mall. I think you absolutely engage that target, and you maybe not so much cooperation with what they're asking. If they're already firing shots, you're going to engage that target. And one of the other things that we point out is, especially for women, if you're in a situation where someone's trying to abduct you or leave the scene, maybe they pull up in a car or they walk up to you and they put a gun to you and they say, hey, you need to get in the car. You absolutely try to fight them at that point and get away. You never, ever cooperate in that situation, because that'll likely be the last time that you'll be heard from at that point. So I think it's very important for people to research and understand the situation that we're talking about.
Yep.
If you're in your nail salon and somebody walks in and starts opening fire and you have a carry weapon on you, it's best for you to probably come out and engage the suspect at that point.
1,000%. Kind of to hit on the couple points that you made. My recommendation always that we used to train police officers as well, and we had to be careful with it because of the liability we had, obviously, if something happened. But from my personal recommendations, yes, if you're a woman and somebody comes up to you, or you're a person, I don't care who you are, and somebody sticks a gun to you and tries to kidnap you and stick you in a car, you better fight, because like you said, and you nailed it on the head, James, is if you get in that car and you don't fight back and you don't scream, claw, do something, nobody's probably ever going to hear from you again. If they're sticking you in a car, it's probably to kill you or to rape you.
Yeah, and it's to take you away from the scene. They didn't come to have a gunfight on the side of the road, or they would have just already killed you. So likely they don't want to kill you there anyway. They want to abduct you and do other harm to you, and then maybe dispose of you afterwards. So if you're in that situation, I firmly believe you definitely want to go ahead and fight back, scream, run. If they shoot you, they shoot you at that point. Getting in that car is going to be a death sentence no matter what.
Yep, 100%. And like you said, when it comes down to an actual active shooter event, which that's like you very much said, and we need to define it. That's when somebody comes into a place with the only intention that they have is to do as much physical harm as possible, as quickly as possible with a firearm, to shoot and kill people. That's what an active shooter event is. They're actively shooting at people, actively killing people. There's tons of movies on them that you can go see. There's a couple on Netflix about the Oslo, Norway shooting that is very good for people to go see, where the guy took a boat to a summer camp and started killing kids. Nobody there had guns. And it turned out very tragically for everybody involved. A couple other active shooter events I'd encourage people to research would obviously be Columbine, if you haven't, the Beslan school shooting in Russia, Mumbai, and there's countless other ones all throughout the world. They don't just happen here, contrary to what people think. They do happen all over the world. It's a very dangerous event, and it's one of those things, even where I work now, we train people that, like you said, the same thing. You have to make a decision of what you want to do. One thing I do want to tell somebody to do, and this is, I wish I could flash big red things up on the board or on the screen, is understand when police get there, if you have a gun in your hand, we do not know who you are. There's no definition of what an active shooter looks like. There's no billboard on their head that says, hey, I'm a bad guy. It's something to think about. If you know police are on scene, or you make the decision to pull your gun out to try to address the threat, and this would happen, I believe, in Oklahoma. Don't quote me, but I want to say it was Oklahoma was the state. It was at a mall where a guy was an off-duty police officer. He engaged the shooting suspect, killed him, but as the police got there, he still had his gun in his hand. The police did what they were trained to do and shot and killed the guy. So that's just something you need to really think about.
Yeah, and if you want to cross-reference that with the Texas church shooting, you'll find that there's a pretty good breakdown. I don't remember exactly who interviewed him. I want to say it was a YouTube. Mm-hmm. I want to say it was a YouTuber that interviewed him, but it was the guy that took out the church shooter.
Yep.
And they go into great detail as to what happened once the cops arrived on the scene. And, once he was aware that the police were approaching, he was able to put his firearm down. He did the whole lay down on the ground thing, letting them know that he was not the threat, actually. And that ended up working out really well for him. Of course, they grabbed him and snatched him at first and got him into custody. And then were able to figure out within a few minutes what the situation was, and that he was the hero of the situation and not the actual suspect. So just be very careful. If you ever unfortunately get into that situation, you're going to have 3, 4, 5 different eyes in the back of your head keeping up with what's going on.
Yep. And if you look at the difference between that versus, the shooting that happened in Charleston with Dylan Roof, I believe was his name, that entered the black church and killed a bunch of people. That's the difference between having somebody who has a firearm and made the decision versus somebody that doesn't. And just something to think about. It's a great responsibility if you do choose to have a firearm on your person. It's not one that should be taken lightly. And training mentally, training physically, knowing how to manipulate the weapon systems and all those things is key to being successful in a situation like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's going to lead you into, what kind of weapon are you looking to carry at this point?
Yep.
So, I know a lot of us, we keep rifles on ourselves as well, but since we're talking about concealed carry more than anything today, we're going to try to keep it to these guys right here, just like you put on the screen. As a matter of fact, I carry a Glock. I carry a 43, not a 43X. I just hadn't upgraded to it yet. But there's a couple of weapons in this genre right here that I think match up really well with each other, and I think they're pretty common that people carry. I'll throw out a list of I think some of the top 3 that people consider their concealed weapon.
Yep.
And a lot of times this is for women as well. So, and you're starting to pull them all up right here, but even before I say it, so we've got the M&P Shield, usually a 9mm. You're going to have the Glock 43, and then you've got things like the Springfield XDS. I think those are 3 very similar weapons that are definitely in the same category. They're very similar in size. I mean, they're almost identical in size. So to me, that's what I've always kind of imagined as the top 3 carry weapons for concealment, especially with newer shooters and women.
Sure, I agree 100%. I'm a huge fan of the 9mm round. Anyways, a couple different reasons. Luckily, where I work, again, I have to be careful saying it out loud. Where I do, I get to see a lot of weapons testing, get to see a lot of the ballistics testing and things that go on. 9mm bullets, especially now, the bonded bullets have great penetration. They have great expansion, great weight retention from the bullets.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times now we're seeing this better penetration with a 9mm round and equal expansion on a 9mm round compared to a 45. 45 caliber used to be the choice, back in the day. It's a gigantic bullet. It's like shooting an ashtray at somebody. It's got a lot of stopping power. That's absolutely correct. But you can't carry a gun with as much capacity. It kicks like a mule, and there's just lots of other things. Personally, my favorite caliber to carry is a 9mm for those reasons. You've got a high ammo capacity, lower weight, great stopping power. It's less expensive to shoot and less expensive to purchase typically.
Yeah, I mean, and you could drop down to 380 at this point. I mean, I think there's definitely a place to talk about the 380 caliber there. I know not as many people carry it. I think 9mm is going to be your more popular caliber, probably around the world.
Oh yeah, 100%, 100%. And it's easy. It's a lot easier to find than a lot of the specialized ammo these days. So again, huge fan. Springfield's website's not cooperating, so I'm trying to show you their gun, but I can't get to it. Again, revolvers, to me, to carry them concealed, they're a little more bulky. You've got the cylinder and things like that. Not a fan. Mm-hmm. I'll show you a couple here in a second. So if you want to keep going, I'll grab these.
Yeah. I mean, again, we covered revolvers, and I know some people, again, they're diehard revolver people, and those guys, gals, whatever they may be, they typically have a lot of experience with revolvers, or they've just always carried a revolver. And anytime I talk to someone that's really, really, really pushing revolvers for personal protection purposes, usually that's coming from people that just they have their own fascination, I guess, with revolvers, or they've just, maybe it's the reliability factor, because they are super reliable. I will say that.
Yes.
But nowadays, I mean, as a matter of fact, an experienced shooter, a very experienced shooter, can miss with several rounds before engaging a target, even at close distances under stress conditions. So when you're carrying something that holds 5 rounds or 6 rounds maximum, that could potentially be an issue where you might not, right away you might not realize that would be an issue, because it seems easy enough to hit someone when they're 10 feet in front of you.
It's not.
And we've seen in many instances where people miss, and very experienced people miss these shots sometimes with 4, 5, 6 rounds, maybe even empty an entire magazine and never hit the person they're targeting.
It happens a lot. If you go look at statistics and police shootings and things like that, I think the last time that I went over one of the studies, I think police were hitting the target somewhere around the 25% mark. The first shots that they were taking, suspects were usually around the 75% hit rate, and I'll kind of go over reasons of why of that in a second. But yeah, you're right. Once the stress hits and bullets are flying, it's not easy to shoot something. It's not like shooting steel. It's not like shooting paper. Like we talked about last week, you don't have the perfect conditions. And a lot of the reasons why the police hit less, and people are like, well, police have better training than the criminals on the street. True, absolutely correct. But what happens is the suspect has already made the decision to shoot the police officer before they ever pull the trigger. The police officer hasn't made the decision yet and planned in their head that they're going to shoot this person, because that's not how the world actually works. So that's why suspects are able to typically get the first shot, the way down on people, and police officers are not. And got Matt with a good question I'm showing right now. So again, yeah, very good option there. I do have an ankle holster that I carry. Thanks for the input on that, Matt. It's good, especially if you're wearing pants. I do like that in the winter, and winter and fall months when I'm wearing blue jeans. Very good way to carry a gun. Very secure, and it is a lot of times more comfortable, in my opinion, depending on what kind of footwear and things you're wearing.
Yeah, and that's where you can even get into some of the micro guns as well, like the Kimbers and things like that. You get into those micro guns, a lot of times chambered in, they make them in 9mm as well, but a lot of times they're chambered in 380.
Yep.
And those do make good ankle guns as well.
Yep, 100%. So I didn't like carrying ankle guns when I was a police officer, just because I had to run and jump over fences and do things. And I actually had a Glock 27 out of my ankle that I had to go backtrack and go find, because my whole entire holster ripped off when I jumped over a fence. Again, all things to consider, but yes, ankle holsters are absolutely a good option for people.
Yeah. And I think the main thing we want to leave the viewers with, if nothing else today, is you want to have something that's comfortable. I'm going to backtrack to what I said about revolvers. As far as revolvers are great weapons, and they're great for a lot of different applications. And I know, again, a lot of people push those for carry weapons, especially for women. I've never really understood that, because of the recoil and because of the lack of capacity and things like that. And you may have a more inexperienced shooter. However, on the range, there's plenty of applications for revolvers. So I don't want it to come across like I'm an anti-revolver guy. But then getting back to what we want to really leave the viewers with today is, you need something that's comfortable, that you're going to be somewhat confident to carry. And if if it's something you can't control the recoil, or if it hurts your hand every time you fire it, it's going to make you hesitant to use it. It's going to make you feel, it's going to make you feel a certain level of inexperience with it, no matter how much you use it. And, and above all, you want to have something that's comfortable, something you're used to, something you've fired quite a bit. And of course, that's going to eventually lead us to training here, which I know we'll be talking about extensively, what people need to do, and some of the resources where they can go to get this kind of training.
Yep.
Even some of the stuff that we're going to be doing in the future here. But yeah, definitely want to get, especially for women that are new shooters, and this would go for males as well. But I always get the questions asked about, mainly from women, if hey, you're into guns, I don't really know anything about them. What's a good suggestion, on a weapon that I would get? And really, there's a few that I could throw out there, and I have thrown them out there before and said, oh, I think this would be a great weapon for you to have. But ultimately, it's you need to go somewhere where you can try these out. There's a lot of ranges where you can rent the weapons.
Yep.
You can make sure you're extremely comfortable with them. Then you need to start training beyond that. You need to start training on extracting it from the holster, extracting it when it's in a covered situation or concealed situation with a shirt, figuring out what carry point on your body you're going to want to carry the weapon at. There's a plethora of things that you're going to have to kind of process in that equation.
Yeah, I'm a big fan, like you hit on, find either a friend that you can that you know likes guns, that's going to be willing to take you out shooting, try out some of their guns that they recommend. Go to a range, absolutely find a range that rents guns. There's plenty I know in our area, all around the metro Atlanta area in the southeast, that you can go rent any kind of a gun you want, try it out. Make sure it's, like you said, it's comfortable in your hands. Make sure it doesn't, the recoil doesn't scare you, things like that. And yeah, absolutely get the training for sure. Like I said, I believe it was last week. Be sure you at least go get some kind of training. If you go to your local sheriff's office or police department, a lot of times they'll offer you an introduction to firearms or a firearm safety style class to kind of make you more comfortable in, carrying a firearm and knowing the ins and outs of the laws, which is hugely important, and being confident in that. And, if, like with test driving a car, you're going to find a car that fits you, and that just really, you can tell it's for you. Like Matt just said, yeah, you got to see which one feels better in your hand, and it will tend to stand out with you. Couldn't agree more. It's just one of those things where you find a gun that you like you hit on the Glock 17 earlier. I'm a huge fan of it. I like the way it fits in my hands. I'm a bigger guy, though. I'm 6'3", and I do like full-size guns when I'm shooting. I have a Glock 19 that I carry as well. I like it, but not without the extended magazine on the bottom, because my pinky tends to go underneath it, and I don't get the right grip that I like.
Yeah, it's definitely, comfort's going to be a big thing, and we'll go back to the comment that was just posted there. I think Matt pointed out, you can tell if you put a gun in your hand for the first time and it's the only one you've ever held, then you can find ways to make it okay with you, to where, wow, this seems like it fits really good.
Yep.
You really need to try out several different weapons, and like the comment said here, it'll kind of stand out to you at a certain point. You'll definitely notice, and comfort is a big thing about it, right?
Yep.
There's functionality, there's comfort. Most of these weapons that we're speaking of have very similar functionality, very similar reliability. So as long as you're, dealing with a reputable brand, you're likely not going to end up with a firearm that is, malfunctions, unnecessarily, that has, a lot of problems or whatnot. So go through 2 or 3 or 4 of these weapons. Take your time to feel if it's, how it fits in your hand. And then from there, you can start looking at the other aspects, target acquisition, your sight picture, things like that. And if you're not familiar with those terms, then you definitely need to go get some training, and there's a lot of places to do that.
Sure. And even one of the new things to consider too, if you're not a fan of iron sights, a lot of guns now are being made where you can get the RMRs or the red dot sights on top of them.
Yeah.
They're cool. I don't like them because I'm old school. I like iron sights better. I just think I get quicker target acquisition. I'm sure if I trained on one with a red dot on it, I'd probably be, just as proficient. But they're cool, especially for somebody starting out and never shooting before. They're really neat. You don't develop habits on shooting iron sights versus shooting out of a red dot on a pistol that you have to kind of break. I think that's part of my problem with it, but just something to think about there. I know Glock makes some. I just saw Springfield make some as well now with RMRs on them. But they tend to get more expensive, and then you're going to have to get a specialized holster for it, and they're more bulky.
Yeah, so there's definitely going to be some disadvantages to it. Again, for someone that's maybe new to shooting, I don't really know how that works, because I had shot with irons well before I'd ever used a red dot.
Yeah.
So, but maybe if someone that's never shot before, I'd like to see that, actually, to see which ones, how well do they pick up on shooting, learning on irons versus learning on red dot, or learning on, something small like an RMR or whatnot.
Yep. And Matt made another great point. Just posted his comment. Back to carry, good tough belt's very critical. Absolutely. That's why I don't like carrying a concealed weapon if I'm wearing like warm-up pants or something like that. I usually find a different place to carry it, typically in a backpack that I can access the weapon quicker. But yeah, having a very good tough belt. I've got an actual repelling belt that I carry a lot of times if I'm wearing pants, because it holds up my pants, puts that pressure up against the gun very well, and allows me to get my gun out of the holster quickly. Yeah.
So, we'll touch on this because it'll kind of tie in with making sure that your clothing's suitable as well. I've been with several people to purchase their first guns and whatnot, and they didn't really know what to get. And one of the common things that I've seen when dealing with people in this regard is that quite often they're not aware of guns being smaller or bigger than other guns. And I know a lot of guys that just defaulted to a full-size weapon, and they're like, oh, no, I'm going to buy this. And then later I find out, what are you buying it for? And they're like, oh, no, I bought it so I could carry it. And it's like, man, you're concealing like G19 or something like, I mean, a G17 is not the most practical thing to do. And,
No.
and at that point, they have a weapon that, either they're going to have to get rid of to get another weapon, or they're just going to have to additionally purchase one. And so you definitely want to take into consideration, how big your body type is, where it sits on your body, what location you particularly plan to carry it in. And so these are things that definitely need to be pointed out, or at least need to be aware of before you go to purchase a weapon, so that you don't end up walking out with something that you can't use for concealment. And then ultimately, hey, it's great. I love having a lot of guns around, and I've actually acquired a few guns like this by not knowing what to get. And then I'm like, well, I'll just buy another gun, because you can never have enough guns, right?
Of course.
But yeah, I mean, for someone that's going to be, budget conscious about it, you want to make sure that you put the research into it. You want to go out and try them out. You want to make sure it fits not just in your hand, but it fits your body and your concealment requiremements.
Yep. And Nick, recommendation, T-Rex Arms. He said their belts are very good. They actually look very well put together.
So Lucas Bott and the guys over at T-Rex Arms, they make some really, really quality stuff. These guys are constantly reinventing even some of their own systems, and they have some really good systems. So I'm a huge fan of T-Rex Arms stuff, and I follow them quite a bit. They have some of the latest stuff on the market. And when I say that they're reinventing stuff quite a bit, quite often it's things that are already recognized as very usable, very user-friendly, very reliable, and they're making these small little tweaks and adjustments to them just to make them better. And so they've evolved, I think, a lot of these weapon systems, especially retention systems, and as well as the additional magazine carriers and whatnot.
Yep, and I'm actually a huge fan of right here. We were talking about the RMR. I believe that's a Glock 19X. Just looking at it, that's one of your RMRs or your red dot right there. And having a belt like that, something we didn't really touch on with the revolvers versus a semi-automatic, is that you have to reload. Carrying speed loaders versus carrying a magazine. Again, a speed loader is going to be a lot more bulky, in my opinion, than carrying another magazine. Having a good belt like the T-Rex belt, like Nick recommended, that you can carry another mag, carry it concealed, huge deal.
Yeah, and if you guys, if any of the viewers are interested and you don't know about T-Rex Arms, you definitely want to go check out their site. You also, probably want to check out their YouTube channel. They have some great instructionals. They put really good content up, whether it's for new shooters or more experienced shooters or even competition shooting. They have a lot of great resources on their YouTube channel as well as their website.
Yeah, and a $65 to $70 price point for a belt like that that's going to hold up and be rigid and be tough. It's something good. And actually, they don't look bad either, which is good too. So. Yeah,
a lot of them that you're going to find, a lot of those range belts like that you're going to see they're in that $100 plus zone. And T-Rex Arms puts out some extremely quality stuff. Anyone that wants to go check out their videos, you'll see what I'm talking about once you go and look up some of their comp shooting and some of their training videos. They do it at a pretty high level, and they're good. The kid, especially the kid Lucas on there, he's a good shooter.
Yep, yeah, huge recommendation. Thanks for that, Nick. We appreciate that, and definitely something to look into. Kind of wanted to hit again just on the training aspect, because we were kind of getting on that, and then we saw the post about the belt. Just be sure, again, you're going to get training from somewhere. Go get defensive tactics training. Go get some type of firearms training from somebody that has qualifications. Check their qualifications and see what they actually have. You get so many people that post content. We've talked about one of them not that long ago. I won't name them, but they've made a name for themselves because they make cool content. That's great. You may watch one of their videos and they're teaching a technique on there that's completely wrong, or they may be bashing a weapon system simply because they don't get paid to endorse that weapon system. There's a person recently that was talking about that a certain gun was trash because it only held X amount of rounds. And when you looked at what the gun was, it was a very small subcompact gun that, if you're carrying a gun in your belt and for what it is, and for something that's this small, it's not going to hold a lot of rounds. And that's one of the downsides to carrying a small gun. Like you and I have always joked about, having a gun like that's a gun to get back to your rifle. But that's
absolutely.
So just get training from somebody that's qualified, check their qualifications, make sure they have a decent resume and should be teaching you anything in the first place.
Yeah, and I think once you start seeking these things out, you'll find, and I'm going to speak to the folks that's directly here in Georgia. This would also stand true for Tennessee Texas would be another one that would fall very similar to Georgia. But around here in Georgia, there is a lot of resources. Whether you know that they're out there already or not, once you start doing a little bit of resource or a little bit of research, you're going to find that there's a enormous amount of resources in the Georgia area. All the way from the Florida, border all the way up to the Tennessee border, everywhere in between. If it's right here in the middle of Atlanta, if it's north side, south, east, or west, there is training everywhere to be had. And a lot of these guys are very reputable. They're either ex-LEO or military or both. And then you do have some guys that are very, very competent shooters and very competent instructors that have neither of those training as far as official LEO, on the job or military on the job as well. But definitely check your resources. There's going to be a lot of people that can show you basics, but as you get into some more of the in-depth fundamentals of how to shoot, your stance, how to grip the gun, things like that, you do want someone that has, I'm not necessarily going to say credentialed, you want someone that has the experience. And if they have the credentials, that's just a plus.
Sure, yeah. I mean, because you get recommendations from people just because they weren't military or they weren't law enforcement doesn't mean they can't shoot. So definitely not saying that. But yeah, get recommendations, references from people before you do spend your time and your money going to train with somebody on something so important to me as firearms training. I've been extremely lucky about my entire career. Gotten my entire life honestly been trained and gotten to shoot around some really cool people that always know more than me, and that's what I think. It's find somebody that just really knows a topic. You can just really beat it into your head and get you trained right, because especially for my first time firearms owners out there watching this, developing good habits initially is so important. If you have the benefit of being a new firearms person that has never shot before, if you get with a good instructor, you are going to go from here to here so much quicker than somebody that, even like me, say I was trying to reinvent how I shoot. I've got habits that I've developed that somebody would have to break for me. You as a new shooter, go find somebody qualified, like James said, credentialed with experience, and develop those good habits early. And you're going to become a very proficient shooter a lot quicker than you think you would.
Yeah, and one of the things that happened to me actually with a little bit of instruction through proxy, we'll say, just in the last year, I actually learned that the eye that I've been shooting with on pistol was my less dominant eye. And I'm a right-hander. I'd always went right eye into the gun. And I realized that to keep both eyes open, I was having to cant my head so far to the left to try to get a clean sight picture without, double vision.
Yep.
A lot of people that I've either worked with on firearms or whatnot before would express that, well, I can't keep both eyes open because I see double vision.
Correct.
And it's like, well, and I'm guilty of it myself. Within this last year, and I've been shooting for a long time, within this last year, I found out that I have been shooting with the wrong eye as well. And it has really helped me with target acquisition and my sight picture, being able to get on target faster, and especially with follow-up shots. So, you want to do some eye dominance testing. There's other resources. We may even put some stuff like this up in the future, but there's some resources out there where you can learn how to test your eye dominance. Yep. I think that's extremely important for a new shooter to do that early on. And then you don't have to go through like what me and you just said, we doing some self-training along the way, and you may develop some habits that seem okay. And then later you realize I have to unlearn these habits so that I can learn other things more properly. 100%. And so it saves you a ton of time. And that's the eye dominance is definitely something that you're going to want to figure out earlier, or definitely sooner than later.
Well, and it's funny you say that. I actually happen to be one of those people that's right-handed and left eye dominant as well.
Yeah.
In the law enforcement training courses, when I was shooting, I would always be like mid 80 percentile, 88 percentile. And then one of the instructors one day just happened to pick up on something I was doing, and he goes, "Hey man, are you left eye dominant?" I'm like, "Yeah, but I'm supposed to shoot my right eye because I'm right-handed." Because I was always trained to shoot with one eye when I pistol shoot, which I do. And so he's like, "Well, try shooting with your left eye." And there was one school of thought that said never ever do that. As soon as I started shooting my left eye, once he picked up on the fact that I was left eye dominant, I went from shooting in the mid 80s to almost shooting 100% scores every time. It was crazy. I went from being, a middle of the pack shooter at my police department to being one of the top guns in my police department almost overnight, because somebody with that experience that could pick up on the nuances of what I was doing was able to point that out and was like, "Here you go." And then it was, game changing for me.
Yeah, very similar to my situation. That was, and then of course you feel a little stupid at first, like, wow, I can't believe I never even once attempted to try it with the other eye,
Yep.
And because in our situation, being right-handed, left eye dominant, you're reaching across the weapon further with your line of sight, and it didn't seem natural. Now it seems absolutely unnatural when I do it with my right eye. I feel like the gun's kind of sitting off to the right side of my body, and everything's trying to favor the left.
Yep.
And basically all the mass of my body is sitting in the left instead of behind the weapon. And so it definitely helped me. It definitely helped me learn how to drive the weapon a little better. And you can start to perform with your pistol very similar to the way that you can perform with like a carbine, let's say. At certain distances.
Yeah, 100%. So again, that's why having somebody that knows what they're doing. If you're going to spend your time and money to get training from somebody, be sure it's somebody qualified. Reach out to your friends, family, your local people. Be careful with Google, because a lot of times you're going to get people with fake reviews. I recommend finding somebody that that you can get personal references from for a topic as important as this. Again, I'm one of those people. I love the Second Amendment, but if you've never shot a gun before and you've never had training, we kind of talked about assets and liabilities last week about something. When we talked about preparedness.
Yeah.
Be sure that you having that firearm is an asset and not a liability, because if you don't have the training, the experience, you don't know how to load the gun, how to manipulate the safety safely and things like that, you're turning something that should be an asset to a liability for yourself. So be sure you take the time and be responsible and go get some training.
Yeah. Well, and then outside of just official training, I mean, there's just a few do's and don'ts that you need to know, outside of being taught necessarily by official instruction. One of those things that I will point out about carrying is, you have a tendency to take the weapon off of you when you come home in the evening or when you're in for the day. And myself, I'm, anyone in my household, and especially the children that I have, I have a 21-year-old and a 13-year-old. And my 13-year-old's, pretty experienced with rifles and whatnot. He's not very experienced with handguns. Although he's not scared of handguns, he's not unfamiliar with them. And, I have a tendency of taking my carry weapon off and putting it in a place where it's still accessible, should I need to grab it in a hurry inside the home. One of the things that I would say to someone that's new to carrying is handguns are more dangerous around the household for kids.
Yep.
Whereas if you do see that there's a fatal accident inside the home with guns, a lot of times it's going to be handguns that were left laying around for smaller children to get a hold of.
Yes.
And so you just want to be aware that when you come home, you want to do something with your weapon so that it's in a safe spot, because you're gonna, especially if you're not used to carrying it early on in your carrying, and maybe it's uncomfortable where you started carrying, because it's no secret, it takes getting used to eye appendix carry. And it took me a long time to get used to sitting in a car with it like that, because it's pressing into you so hard. And eventually your body adapts to it to a certain degree. But I know a lot of people, when they first start doing that, they're going to be anxious to yank that weapon off of them when they get back, to their home or to their dwelling that they'll be staying in for the evening. Yep. And just be mindful of where you put the weapon at that point. And then I guess another topic we can look at is, do you carry with one in the pipe? Do you carry with one out? I'll go ahead and throw my opinion out there. You always want to have the gun completely ready to fire. If you don't, you're at a massive disadvantage. Yes. I think that goes without saying, but that's just my opinion. I'll throw that over to you and let you explain a little bit of that as well.
You kind of hit back on both those topics. Both very two good things. The one you just brought up, carrying one in the chamber, always without question, because in my opinion and my experience as a police officer and just as a firearms owner and just seeing how quickly events can unfold. If you're carrying a gun in, a holster on you without one in the chamber, you're carrying a brick on your side. You're not carrying a gun at that point. You're carrying something you might as well throw at somebody. We could get into fine motor skills and gross motor skills. And like Matt says, seconds matter. Absolutely. If you're in a stressful situation and you're trying to manipulate a gun or even, trying to do all these things, you're not going to remember if your gun, got one in the chamber, the safety's off or things like this. That's why you have to train and beat that muscle memory in your head. Never, in my opinion, this is just one guy's opinion that happens to be the same as yours. Never carry a gun unloaded if you're actively carrying it. If you want to unload it when you get home because that's your thing, that's your thing. That's fine. But again, just understand if you don't have one in the chamber, seconds matter, milliseconds matter in a shooting. If you get that cut off, and you're not, again, going from here to shooting is a lot quicker than going from here and being like, oh man, my gun, trying to rack one in the chamber. Yeah. And then who knows if your magazine is falling, starting to fall out. I've seen that happen before where, police officers were on the range that I was training. They want to go pull their gun out. They didn't realize that their weapon system wasn't completely right. They go to shoot, go to fire the first round, their magazine falls out of their gun because it wasn't seated properly, but at least they had one cut off. So, and as far as guns in the household, this is one thing we used to always teach when I was at the police department. The way I've always taught it and been taught is take the mystery out of the guns with kids. This is just me. Again, one guy's opinion.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree 100%.
My kids know that I own guns. They know what kind of guns I own. They know not to tell anybody about what I own, but they know I own guns. I think the day after we did the last podcast, my 9-year-old daughter, for the first time in my life, was like, hey, Dad, can I look at one of your guns? Absolutely. Let's go. I took her to where, the gun was at, made sure it was safely and unloaded. I said, here you go. And I was explaining to her that, you go over all the firearm safety rules, never point a gun at somebody unless you want to shoot. You never point a gun at something unless you intend to shoot it. Don't put your finger on the trigger. All the rules of firearms you teach people, but take the mystery out of it. When kids see something like that, it's cool. And unfortunately, they see, video games and see movies and things, and they're like, oh, that's a gun. That makes cool sounds and, does what it does. Yeah. Take the mystery out, and I think you're going to lower your chances significantly of something bad happening. That said, a lot of times we see with firearms deaths, especially with younger kids, with the little kids, it's tragic, but for them to manipulate the trigger system on a gun, if you think about how weak their fingers are, they can't just point a gun at somebody and pull the trigger because their hands aren't strong enough, believe it or not. Most times you see where they have to turn it towards themselves and they're looking at the barrel and they have to squeeze it with their thumbs. And that's why a lot of times you see them shoot themselves, is because they're trying to get the trigger to go off, but they can't without pointing it at themselves, simply because it's easier for them to press back against the gun than it is to point it somewhere else and pull the trigger, just because they're not strong enough. There's been tons of studies done on that. So my 1,000% opinion, as far as having a gun in the house, if you're going to have one, you need to educate your kids just as much as you educate yourself. One thing I've done with all 3 of my kids, I've got one in the Navy, and that's 20 years old, and I've got my 11-year-old, my 9-year-old. They've all been shooting with me. My 9-year-old has yet to shoot a gun, but my 11-year-old has shot a rifle, a shotgun, and a pistol. And I'll take items out there, pumpkins or watermelons or something, so they can see that these guns actually do damage things other than just a hole in the paper. This is, again, just me showing them that, you can blow a watermelon up or something like that with a shotgun, or it puts tons of holes in it, a giant hole in it. It kind of opens their mind to, like, it's serious. They can be fun. They're a lot of fun. There's plenty of shooting competitions and things you can do, 3-gun, pistol matches. It's a sport as well as protection, but it's something not to be taken lightly. Gun ownership should not be taken lightly. It's a huge responsibility, and I'm going to hit on one of my pet peeves in a second after you respond. So what you got? And then I'm going to bring up something else as far as securing your guns.
Yeah, it's, anything that's kept that secretive is going to be sought out. So, and I think you pointed it out there a moment ago, as far as, keeping a secret about, the mystery of that gun that's in the house, my kids see weapons all the time. Yeah. There's no mystery to it whatsoever. So for them, to try to go seek it out and do something else with it because they have to sneak around, well, they know they don't have to do that. They can just ask me for it, and yeah, so I think that definitely does contribute to the accidents that you do hear about, is when something is so secretive and it's so taboo, and they finally catch a glimpse of it when mom and dad's not around, or they know where it's at, and they're going to sneak it out and try to take a look at it, because number one, curiosity is going to eventually get the best of them no matter what.
100%.
Whether you're willing to show them, what they're curious about, or whether you feel like you have it hidden enough and they'll never find it, and then they're going to go cure that curiosity on their own at some point, and your kids are smart. As they get older, they're going to be able to figure out your passcodes and where your keys are and what you do with this and what you do with that. It's just a part of life, So definitely it does help, I think, early on to take some of the secretive aspect out of it. But you touched on using something that has more of an effect once it's shot, more so than maybe paper or cardboard.
Correct.
And definitely, I can point back to the very first time my youngest son was about 7 or 8 years old, and he wanted to. I'm sorry, this would have been. I think this is my oldest son actually, and he wanted to shoot one of my rifles. No, this would be my newest. This was my youngest son. This is my 13-year-old now. He's probably about 7. And we had one of our ARs set up. I flipped a little bipod onto it so he could access it a little bit better off of a table. And he shot it once, and he was like, wow, like the concussion of it, was a little bit overwhelming to him. And I think it was more than what he expected.
Yep.
And then we finally put, I think, a watermelon. I want to say we used the same thing that you were talking about. I want to say we used a watermelon or a cantaloupe or something like that. And when we put that out and we let him shoot it and he saw what happened to that, he was like, oh, wow. So there's actually consequences to that. And at that point, he really didn't want anything to do with them for a while. It would probably be all the way up until he was 10, 11, 12 years old before he even started getting interested in them again.
Yeah.
And then at that point, he'd grown up enough to where he was just a little bit more mature. I'm not saying he was a mature adult or anything like that, but he was a little more mature about it. He wasn't as scared of it. And then we were able to have some productive conversation and some productive training.
Well, and I think you kind of hit on it. It gave him a healthy respect for the gun. He knew that, it was not a toy. And it's one of those things where it's, being scared and having a healthy respect for it kind of are one and the same, maybe. But yeah, him seeing that they can happen. That's why I told, both my sons have shot the guns. I'm like, look, if you shoot somebody, they may not live. They may not come back. You can't unshoot somebody when you pull the trigger and you sent that bullet wherever you're shooting it. There's nothing you can do about it. It's done. It's over with. That's a wrap. And both my sons, my oldest son, he loves shooting competitions. He shot Glock GSSF matches, won a bunch of trophies and stuff doing it because he developed a passion for it. But I think a lot of that was us taking the mystery out of it early, him having fun. I think the first gun he shot of mine was my AR, and he shot it and just loved it and kind of just went from there with it. So take the mystery out of the guns, encourage your kids, to learn about them. It's just one of those things where, like you said, curiosity will absolutely get the best of them. If you don't think that they know where your alcohol is stored, you're a fool. If you don't think they know where your guns are stored, you're a fool. Any other adult items, if you don't know any of that stuff, they know where it is. If you don't think they do, you're wrong.
Yeah.
So then that brings me to storage. For the love of all that is good in the world, if you're going to own a gun, do not leave it in your vehicle overnight unsecured in your driveway. Don't leave it. If you're going to carry it to the store, not carry it with you, don't carry it with you. That's just my opinion, because I have seen 90% of the firearm thefts I ever worked as a police officer were guns that were in vehicles left unsecured in a vehicle. If you're going to carry a gun with you, and I get, like, of course, I'm like you, I carry other guns with me. Be careful, but absolutely don't leave them in your vehicle overnight in your driveway with your doors unlocked. We used to get calls constantly with people being like, well, yeah, they pulled on my door handle and they got me, my Glock 17 with, 3 33-round mags, and yeah, they got this and that. And I was like, oh, that's good. Now there's another gun out there that, bad guys got in their hands because you were lazy. So secure your weapons. If you're going to have them in your vehicle and you're going to go to the mall, please don't leave them in plain sight. I've seen that happen before too, where they're like, oh, I left it sitting on my seat. I'm like, well, gee, I wonder why they picked your car to break into.
Yeah, no. And firearms they're very sought after with criminals these days. And vehicles, like you said, I think is where they find most of them.
Yep.
And you got to be careful about what you tag your vehicle with, right? You got a bunch of firearms representations on your vehicle, on your windows, your windshield. A lot of people, when they get any kind of product they just become automatic sponsors almost of this product. Like they're doing the marketing for the company. I really never understood that. I used to see people ride around with like Monster Energy stickers all over their vehicle, and it's like, are you a rep for Monster Energy? Like, I never really understood that whole concept of what you thought you were representing there. Maybe you just drink a lot of them and you just want to tell everybody that. I don't know, but the same thing would apply to your guns as well. If you've got a lot of Springfield and Smith & Wesson and Glock stickers all over your vehicle, you definitely don't want to leave guns in it at that point, because it has definitely become a target. And just take that a step further. The reason that police vehicles are a target is because it's assumed that there's weapons in them.
Yeah, 100%. We had, a lot of our guys would leave back in the day before it became a real thing. When I was on patrol, guys would leave their rifles in the rifle racks in their vehicle, but people can figure out ways to get the rifle racks out of the vehicle and take your gun, and then they'll get the gun out of it later. I think you hit the nail on the head with the stickers. I've actually interviewed suspects before or after the fact that I took into custody for car break-ins that had stolen some guns and things like that, and they did absolutely tell me that's why they targeted certain vehicles in a parking lot, because this particular person had, you know, Glock, I think he had Glock and Smith & Wesson stickers all over his pickup truck.
Yeah.
But we kind of figured that, you know, there would be a gun in there just because. So it's one of those things where, yeah, be smart about it. It's kind of being unseen. It kind of goes back to carrying open versus carrying concealed. Don't make it obvious you've got a weapon on you and you won't be a target any more than somebody else. And you don't want bad guys to know you're a target for a multitude of reasons. It's just safer for you, period. And it just gives you extra reaction time.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think this would be a good time for us to maybe we're going to jump back just a little bit right here, or I'd like to anyway.
Sure.
So let's look at new carriers, people that are just getting into carrying. Maybe they just got their permit, or maybe they're looking at getting their permit now. So they're going to be new to this whole thing. And they may even be completely new with the gun. But we'll start first with, let's say that someone is somewhat familiar, they just never carried. Yep. And so one of the questions I get a lot, or at least one of the statements that I get from people is, I want something that has an external safety on it because I'm going to like put it in my purse from time to time. I don't want something to get caught like a you know, a pen or a pencil to get caught in the trigger well, or a makeup pencil or something like that and cause the gun to go off, because they do want to carry one in the chamber.
Yep.
They do want some means of not being able to pull that trigger. And, you know, as we know, it's nice to say, because I hear this argument a lot when you talk about some of the weapons, and I'm going to mention Glock just because it's the first one on my head.
Sure.
When you talk about a lot of the weapons, that the only form of real safety on them is the actual trigger mounted safety that's on the actual trigger mechanism itself. True, that trigger can't be fired from a side angle where you're putting side pressure on the outside edge of the trigger.
Right.
But anything that's in the center of that trigger well is going to fire that gun once it's pulled backwards.
That's correct.
And so I do, mainly women that's come to me before about, hey, like, what would be a good weapon? Maybe you could show me some stuff, or whether we've went to the range with them or whatnot. They were very big on, I don't want to carry a Glock right off the bat because I'm not as experienced. And I'm not picking on Glock in any way. They're a primary example of guns that don't have external safety.
100%.
And they didn't want to carry a Glock specifically. They wanted something. I've always steered them toward not even like an XD where it has the backstrap safety, but I've always steered them towards like the M&P Shield, which has the thumb safety on the top of it. You can kind of give me your thoughts on that. Let's say for a new shooter, well, maybe what some of the pros and cons of them having that safety on. I mean, obviously, it's going to be safer to, if you want a safety, you want an external one so you can keep one in the chamber. I think not having one in the chamber and having the safety on is a really bad idea.
Sure. So it just, again, it goes back to, like you said, first-time carriers versus experience. And it also goes to how you're carrying your weapon. If you're carrying it in your purse, you know, in my opinion, it needs to be in a pocket. My wife has her particular purse that she carries her gun in, has two large pockets, and that has a pocket in the middle where she can easily get to her gun. She carries a G45, one of Glock's hybrid 9mm, wherever she goes. And she knows, I've told her, hey, don't have anything else in that pocket. It needs to be, she doesn't even have her spare magazines in that pocket. They're in a different pocket in her purse. But I'm like, nothing but the weapon goes in there, period, for that reason, because you're right. Glocks have a safety beyond the trigger safety. It's a drop safety in the weapon.
Yeah.
You're right. If you can't pull the trigger from a side angle or some crazy thing like that. You have to actually depress. There's a little plastic piece in the center of the trigger. You have to push that down, and then you can follow through with the rest of the trigger pull. So for a first-time person, if you're going to carry it in your purse and you're not comfortable carrying it on your side, maybe look at something like you said with a safety on it. The first gun that my wife carried on her person happened to be a Ruger LC9. It was a very small, compact gun. And it had an external safety on that you can manipulate with your thumb. It was very easy. But it's just one of those things where you need to think about what your comfort level is and, again, how you're carrying it. If you're going to have a single pocket purse and have a gun in there with one in the chamber and without a safety, or you're not going to have any kind of a holster, don't carry a gun without a safety on it because it's dangerous. That's something else you need to look into guns. Do my guns have a drop safety on them? Can the firing pin move forward when I'm not pulling the trigger? There's certain guns that if you drop them, they can go off, and that's something to think about. Glock's one of those guns that has the drop safeties on them. I believe Smith & Wesson does as well, where you can throw it off the Empire State Building, and in theory, it's not going to go off because it has a safety in it that it won't go off when you drop the gun. So it's personal preference, like you said, and I get it as a first-time, gun owner, why. But to go back to Matt's, comment, in my opinion, seconds matter in a gunfight.
Yeah, absolutely.
Personally, I don't want to have to matter. I don't want to have to worry about it. But at the flip side, if you're already carrying it in your purse, you have to take the time to open your purse to get the gun out. What's another second to get the safety off? So I guess that's one way to look at it. Because if it's in your purse, you're not going to get to it nearly as quickly as somebody like you or I that's got it on your side that can just draw, a holstered position. So, in my opinion, the absolute way to carry it, even as a woman, and they make great holsters for women now that go in like yoga pants and things like that have really good retention. I would carry it on your side if it was me. That's the most effective way to carry it. I'm not going to say it's the safest or not safest, but it's the most effective way to carry a gun, in my opinion, because you can get to it much quicker. Action is always faster than reaction. There's tons of studies on it, and that's why it's important. If you're going to carry it in your purse, you need to think about any debris you have in your purse, things you carry that could slide into the trigger guard that could cause your gun to go off. If you dropped your gun and say a pencil, like you said, to your statement, if you had a pencil in there just right, you drop your purse and the purse forces the pencil back against the trigger, your gun could go off and shoot somebody. So it's something to think about.
So, yeah, and I highly advise, even when folks are going, this is a personal preference for me. If you're going to have a lady carrying a weapon in her purse, she probably still needs to look at a holster as well, even while it's inside the purse. And, then you're getting into, again, we're getting into extending that reaction time out a little bit.
Yep.
And that's why, I think anyone that carries in their purse, when they're in the situations that maybe they bought the gun for, let's say you're leaving work, you're in a parking deck, and you're going to travel from the building out to your car now, it's not a bad idea to reach into your purse, have your, have your hand in your purse, while it's shouldered, and maybe already be ready with that gun just in case, So there are some ways that you can carry it a little more effectively, even if you have it holstered inside your purse, let's say. But as far as getting back to the safety mechanism on there, if you're going to carry with an external safety, you definitely need to train with that external safety as well. So you definitely need to run some drills when you're at the shooting range where you have the safety on and you're going to bring the gun up, go to safety off, and then start firing the weapon. And that way you train your reaction times or your action times, we'll say, in that instance. And, you at least you have a better expectation of your shooting and your abilities.
Yep. And who knew on our podcast within the first month we'd be showing pictures of purses, but there you go. They do make, I purposely don't have the brand showing because I'm not that familiar with them, I guess, as I say down in the comments. But as a woman, go out there, go research some stuff. I haven't done enough research on this, so I can't recommend one brand versus another. But there are purses out there you can carry that have holsters built into the purse. Something to maybe reduce the seconds that you have to worry about, maybe reduce, the thought that, my gun will go off if I have it in my purse. So that's just something to think about, as a woman or as a female, think about those things. If you're going to carry, start thinking outside the box. They do make purses that you can absolutely carry a weapon in that have holsters built into them for your gun to where you can kind of have to take that worry out about the safeties. An incident I can tell you about and again, I'm a huge Glock guy. This isn't a bad thing, but something to think about was an incident I saw where unless you pull the trigger, the gun won't go off thing. Well, a close friend of mine who was a police officer was in a shooting. He was on a traffic stop, pulled over a vehicle, and he was carrying a Glock 27. It's a 40 caliber, a smaller one, on his vest, basically like cross carry here to where, as a backup gun, he'd cross draw and come out with it. Well, he got in the shooting. The bad guy shot him. He got hit in his trigger finger on his right hand, here through his tricep, here through his side, and another one hit him on his vest. Well, as he was retreating back to his vehicle, the bad guy shot him. And one of the bullets, and this is $1 million shot, I promise you this is a true story. I've seen the gun, seen the pictures of it, and seen the bullet hole in the car. Well, as he was turning away and running away, the bullet came in, hit the trigger on his Glock 27. Thankfully, the 27 was facing towards the bad guy's car. His 27 activated, and it shot a bullet out of his backup gun and back at the bad guy's car. Hit the car, didn't hit the bad guy. But that's just something to think about, that kind of stuff can happen. And when you're considering buying a firearm, you need to think of your comfort level when you purchase one.
Yeah. And, I carry exclusively Glock handguns. So kind of backtracking to what I said earlier, I wasn't trying to, put any kind of knock on Glock or anything like that. However, I'm just so that it's said, I'm a huge supporter of women carrying carrying a firearm for sure. And we do some training courses here. Like I said earlier, we have some self-defense courses we do for women, and we always spend, the last 10 or 15 minutes or so at the very least discussing, carry, weapons carry and things like that, asking people what their comfort level is around weapons.
Yep.
And I run into a few that a lot of times they don't want to speak up in these courses. I can tell too, because everyone else is pretty, smiles on their face and they're kind of raising their hand for stuff. And then I can always tell there's usually a couple that just the word firearm or talking about a gun is, absolutely a no-no.
Yeah.
And I wonder where a lot of that comes from, especially in nowadays when it's very common. I think I run into a lot of females, especially that do carry, and in general, I just run into a lot more people now that carry, and sometimes it's quite surprising when I meet people and then I find out later that they carry. And I think those are some of the best situations because you kind of you wouldn't expect that they would have a weapon. But I still do see quite a bit. They're very intrigued by the idea of self-defense. They understand there are threats towards them out there that they need to be aware of. Ultimately, as a self-defense instructor, we will teach, especially women in these courses, that the firearm is going to be your ultimate form of self-defense. And we still have a lot of people that just absolutely, it's out of the question. They don't want to hear they don't want to take in any educational value on firearms, anything like that. They just don't want anything to do with it. And they're just very closed-minded to the whole idea. And, ultimately, I think we need to make a really good effort to try to get more information out there, try to increase the comfort level, and maybe get more people on board with carrying, because women are definitely a target more so than men are.
Yes, 100%. And yeah, thank you. Very good points. We're going to hit on that in a second as well. I agree. You got to women are always targets because suspects just view them, and I'm not saying this to be sexist at all, but that's what the stats show. Suspects view women as an easier target, a softer target.
Yeah, absolutely.
Much to pick on somebody that's a woman then versus a dude that's 6'3", 240 pounds and plays football. It just is what it is. It goes back to the active shooter thing we talked about earlier. That's why they give up upon the first resistance, because they are going after soft targets, whether it's women or whatever else. They're going after soft target. Once it's not a soft target anymore, they tap out. So that's great points there, James. 100%. Tori, thank you for bringing these up. I can't believe I didn't hit on these earlier. Trigger guard holsters. It says screen froze and perfect for purses and pockets. You're absolutely right. We had guys when I was undercover narcotics agent that this is what they carried their guns in. They liked having a guard over the trigger just because they could draw very easily from their belts with them. They're very small, they're very light, and they're perfect for a purse. You can actually probably manipulate those holsters. If I had to guess, I need to try it in my wife's purse, probably get one and try it to where you could tie the string to the purse to where you can actually pull the gun out of the holster with the holster still in the purse and not ever really have to put your hand on the holster to pull it out. So it's something to think about for your carry consideration. They're very inexpensive too. There's several different brands. They run anywhere from $20 to on up from there, but they're very, very inexpensive, which is a huge plus.
Yeah, I can't remember ever. I know I've never had one. I can't remember ever even. I don't know that I've ever seen a Kydex holster that doesn't have the trigger covered on it, especially inside the waistband. I don't know that I've ever seen one. I'm sure they exist. Maybe it's just my lack of, shopping around more than just going for the things that I already know that I want. But yeah, I would tend to say that the majority of the Kydex inside and outside the waistband holsters are going to have the trigger well protected. Does that sound right to you? Or?
Oh yeah, 100%. It's just a matter of how big of a one you want. The trigger guard holster, like he said, they're tiny. The couple that I've seen are about that big. They're super light, super effective. So yes, thank you for that, Tori. We appreciate it. All right, so I guess start recapping. You got anything else you want to talk about today, bud?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think we've covered most everything here, and again, I want to just leave the viewers with you have to train for everything, and we're going to repeat ourselves a lot, I think, in every episode that we do, regardless of what we're talking about. When it relates to firearms, it's going to be you have to get the training for it. So, it's great to have a lot of nice toys and a lot of neat looking toys, and they're fun to shoot and they're fun to target practice with. They're fun to train with if you're doing a little more serious training. But at the end of the day, It's how much training are you doing? How comfortable are you with the firearm? How comfortable can you at least attempt to make yourself in a stressful situation? And, there's ways to train with stress and being induced as well. But definitely get out, get you some training. If you're new to firearms, I think the first step would be to find a friend. I would venture to say that everyone probably has someone in their social circle that they could reach out to. That's that gun person. We've touched on this before. At least reach out to them, start getting a little idea about what's going on. Then if, maybe move up to someone that's even more competent, a professional at a gun range, check some references, talk to some other people in the gun community about where's good training's at. There's plenty of resources that you can find, usually locally, depending, no matter where you're at. I know here in Georgia, I'll repeat myself again, there's tons of places to train. So there's really no excuse for not having the training. If you live around the Atlanta or really anywhere in the Georgia area.
Yep. Yeah, and that's all great points. It's one of those things. Go find, like we said it over and over again, go find training. Again, James and I will be offering an introduction to firearms class and kind of a hybrid self-defense thing. We're still in the infant stages. I'm actually working on the lesson plan for it now at his gym. And just, again, we will not be doing any shooting at those classes. We'll be going over in much more depth of what we talked about today. With firearms choices, actually allowing people maybe to manipulate some of those guns, hold them in their hand. Oh, this is what they look like. This is how they feel. Going over ammunition choices and things like that. It's huge. Just get training from somebody qualified. We can't say it enough. Mentally train yourself. You know that you carrying a firearm could be potentially life-saving for you and your family. And I want to hit on something big for next week. This is going to be our guest next week on the podcast, our first guest outside of James and I, so you get a little bit of a break from having to listen to both of us rant. We're going to have Lance LaRusso of the LaRusso Law Firm on next week. For those of you that don't know, he is one of the attorneys representing Officer Garrett Rolfe from the Atlanta Police Department. Officer Rolfe was involved in the shooting and obviously subsequently charged by Paul Howard of the Fulton County DA's office. And Lance is representing him. Lance is a close friend of mine. I've known him for many years. He's a champion of law enforcement. He's great to talk to. You guys will learn a lot. We're going to cover a multitude of topics, again, like we do every time. I don't want to reveal them all right now, but we're going to put them on Unfiltered Truth webpage and are on the Facebook page for you guys to start seeing. We'll start releasing some of those topics. We expect this to be a longer than normal podcast. We'll probably go a little over 2 hours because I want to give him all the time to talk about current events going on in the world, the situation with Rolfe and anything else he actually wants to talk about. And any questions you guys may have for him. He said he loves live questions. So if you have a question for an attorney that you've seen on Court TV, Fox News, CNN, all these other outlets, this is your chance to ask him a question. He's super good. He's represented me before, both when I was in the auto accident and in my officer-involved shooting. I can't say enough about his knowledge and his friendship and just how excited I am to have him on. It's going to be a very good one.
And guys, this is gonna be a big event right here, especially for our podcast. I want to say that this will be one of the only, at least so far this year, long form conversations you're going to get to see with this guy. So
yeah, it's the only one.
So yeah, we're going to definitely have him for a while. I think one of the adjustments that'll be made to that. Are we doing that at 2:00?
That's at 2:00, and I believe it's on a Wednesday. It is so Wednesday the 22nd. So a week from tomorrow at 2:00, from 2 to 4 is we're going to try to go for. He's got it slated longer if we need him, but I do expect it to be one of those things where we're going to have plenty to talk about. So, and I expect.
It'll be interesting to hear his take on even some of the past topics that we've had outside of the current situations that are going on. So.
Yep. Yeah, he's a great guy. Does a lot of work in the community, and it should be an interesting one. So, James, I'll let you close it out for today.
Yeah. So, if anyone has any questions about anything we've discussed here today, maybe we missed some stuff. I know we didn't cover everything. We tried to cover as much as we could, and typically these things run about an hour and a half. So, if you guys have any additional questions, feel free to throw them into the comments. These videos they stay posted permanently on our Facebook page as well as our YouTube page. So. If you guys, haven't already, maybe think about taking a look at us over at YouTube, and it's the Unfiltered Truth on YouTube as well. We would love for you guys to like the videos, maybe even subscribe. And if you subscribe, go ahead and hit the notifications icon there. The best selection you can do on that notification icon is hit all. That
Yeah.
way you get all of our notifications, and we'll try to keep you up to date as much as we can on these current events, as well as firearms is always going to be a big topic with us. So like I said, these videos stay up. So if you guys want to go back and review them, pass them along, share them for sure. We definitely want to build, our presence on YouTube as much as possible. We've pulled some really big numbers in this last episode leading up to this one in the past week or so. So I definitely want to thank all the fans for that. You guys have been unbelievable. And, again, give us more topics, throw out, things that you want us to talk about more specifically than broad topics. Maybe jump in with some specifics. Feel free to throw them in the comments. We'll give you a shout out when you do, and we'll throw your comment up on the site here when we get started in one of these episodes, and we'll directly address what that is. So the fan interaction's been great. We want to continue that. Anything else you got there, Eric?
No, just be sure you tune in next week. Again, it's going to be Wednesday, and I'm going to post it in the comments. Next Wednesday at 2 p.m., we'll have Lance LaRusso. Again, super excited to have him. So a little bit of schedule change. Wednesday, 2 p.m. instead of Tuesday at 3. I just had to work around his availability, and this will be the first video long-form kind of podcast he's ever done. To hit to your points, most of these times when we're discussing these issues on the media, and one reason why you and I started doing this in the first place was the fact that we want to be able to break topics down kind of surgically to talk about them and give people an opportunity to respond, which you don't get that in a newscast. You get a 30-second to 2-minute snippet of somebody's opinion and with no real chance to respond. And I think that's a lot of the problem with the world today is we don't give each other the opportunity to respond and to actually state their points. So excited to have him again Wednesday at 3 p.m. or 2 p.m. next week. I'm sorry, Wednesday, 2 p.m. next week, the 22nd. Be sure you tune in. It's going to be an outstanding one. And stay safe, and thank you for tuning in. Like James said, y'all's support means everything to us.
Absolutely. You guys get some training, and we'll see you back here next week.